What is up, people? It is Dave. It is Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Italy-based post-metal band Metide. The band's new album, Erebos, will be released on July 7th via Black Lion Records. Erebos is Metide's second full-length studio album, following up the 2019 LP Solution and the 2022 EP Circadian. Recorded and engineered by Enrico Baraldi at Vacuum Studios, mixed by the band's guitarist and singer Omar, and mastered by the iconic James Plotkin, Erebos wants to take its listener along an intense, introspective journey. The 6 tracks are tied together by allegorical imagery and raw visceral lyrics, while the sonic research of the band opens to a variety of explorations in the post-metal genre and beyond. With Erebos, we take one more step into our path, delving deeper into the unknown, sonically and narratively. The mythological imagery of Erebos, the darkness itself, and its infernal rivers ignites the allegory in the effort to draw paths through a matter that is both ethereal and relatable at the same time. Keeping our roots firm in a heavy, guitar-driven post-metal wall of sound, the new tracks bring more contamination to the lot, aiming to picture the descent into the black that sooner or later we are all called to face in our life. Okay, so the new album from Metide, new band. For me, hadn't heard of them prior to this, but Italian obviously took a keen interest, being part Italian myself, and post-metal was pretty high on my list of best genres in 2022. So I was keen to hear whether 2023 would also bring the same caliber of post-metal this year. Duncan, what about yourself? What did you hadn't heard of the band? Were you the same as me?
No, so and also like Italian post-metal isn't exactly, it's not exactly on the map, so to speak. The only other one that I could think of off the top of my head was La Fin.
Oh yeah,
who we spoke about 2 years ago, who had that fucking stunning album, and then we heard nothing about them since. I'm assuming they're still on the go, and if they are, go and write another album and tour Scotland, please, because they were amazing. But yeah, like yourself, I wasn't au fait with this one. I mean, I knew the term Erebus. I know the kind of the Greek myth around Erebus and the eternal darkness.
Yeah.
So you call your album that, I'm intrigued, and I like the artwork, and I like Italian music in general. There's a few artists that I think are criminally underrated, and some that are really, at the moment in this genre anyway, really kind of putting their fucking their mark on the map. So it was one where, like yourself, post-metal, by the end of last year, I was calling it the year of post-metal. I was like, this genre has literally, in the last 6 months of that year, just elevated the genre completely up.
Yeah.
But it has been relatively quiet. That's not to say post-metal bands haven't been releasing things, but they've been releasing things less abrasive. I'm looking at You, The Ocean, an album which I loved, but is very far removed from it, and they're one of the stalwart entries, like in terms of the bands behind it. So Metide were always going to be one that I knew I was going to have to, all the albums were reviewed in this session. It was long, and I knew I was going to have to find a time and space where I didn't have distractions, i.e. not at my work desk or not while I was trying to settle the kids. I needed a night time to sit down, put it on, and just let it wash over me. Which this album surely did.
Yeah, I was the same. I actually, the first listen I gave to this was just in the wrong environment, because I was doing other things, and I was just like
jigsaw and chess at the same time.
Yeah, and that's
Metide around in the background. I can't get fucking what we're doing.
Yeah, so I don't think I was actually taking it all in on that first listen. It was a bit kind of like I was doing bits and pieces, and I was picking up some of it, and I was like, all right, wait a minute, right, we've listened to it, but the next time I listen to this, I need to just set aside some time and just listen to that on its own without anything else going on in the background. And my second listen to this, probably because I knew going in what what to expect in terms of the style and the pace and the tone. It was a much different listen the second time round than the first one. I definitely found the second listen more rewarding than the first one. It's quite a dense album, but it actually does have a lot to offer beyond it just being a kind of sludgy post-metal album. I think that the post-metal stuff is really well done. I thought it was well constructed. The tracks are lengthy, as most like post-metal often is, but I thought they used the time on the tracks very wisely. There's a lot of the inevitable post-metal slow burn build-up, which starts off quiet, and clean, and then out of nowhere it hits you with this like wall of kind of thick post-metal distortion. And when you get into the depths of it though, the tracks do kind of show a bit more. They're layered more. There's a bit of texture in there. There's a bit of melody in the lead work. And I actually thought the first track, Acheron, huge Tool vibe on that first track.
Yep.
Rhythmically especially, and then even there was moments where in the tone of the guitars at times where they like to use different levels of distortion. So something slightly less abrasive they would bring in certain sections, but it kind of reminded me of Tool a little bit there as well. But it's very clever because then it also allows them then to ramp it up at times as well and push the tracks into somewhere even heavier as the track progresses. But I liked that even though track 2 is around the same length as opener, but just over 11 minutes, they didn't just give you a repeat of that first track. Lethe is much more expansive, longer sections, a lot of clean guitars, and more kind of ethereal atmosphere going on that track. It does build, like as most of the tracks do, and then you start to get that kind of like Cult of Luna or kind of the Ocean kind of esque kind of sound. But I like the fact they gave you something with a bit more contrast on the second track, and you've got a bit of a blend of post-metal and even maybe post-rock a little bit in some of the guitars, making it sound different in tone from the previous track. The third track, Styx, takes another kind of shift in tone, so this one definitely felt darker, kicking off with this really like almost like post-apocalyptic kind of undertone sitting in the background. Not the first time we mentioned this band tonight, but a little bit LLNN in the atmosphere. And it was that kind of doomy kind of post-metal build-up. But I liked, again, similar to track 1, they do play with a lot of cool rhythms, which is not a kind of standard kind of post-metal thing. And they don't stay within that 4/4 time signature all the time. I like that they play a lot with the offbeats, which for me it made it a lot more interesting. Just probably my kind of drummer brain, but it was kind of a little bit more off kilter than some of the more kind of regular post metal stuff that you might hear. And then they took the album to a place that I wasn't completely expecting, and they added another kind of side to their sound. So you've got Cocytus, which sounds like a very unpleasant infection of the peen, which is track 4. I think it's something to do with Greek mythology, but
all the tracks are based on Greek. These are the 5. Well, if you remove Erebos, the 5. This is me showing my fucking. This is what happens when I don't sleep and I get a lot of time on myself. Masturbation, obviously, but also like a deep dive into. I used to be fascinated with Greek mythology. Everything minus Erebos are the 5 rivers of Hades. Hades is the underworld, so each of them represent a different aspect. Acheron being, I think it's the river lacking joy. Lethe is the river of woe. Styx is the river of anger. Cocytus has escaped me. Phalacion, or whatever it's called, which also sounds like an infection of the peen. Like something flesh eating. Let's not do that. Or a new fleshlight, one of the two. That one I think is River of Fire.
Right.
So they're all different levels. You imagine it's almost like the Greek interpretation of Dante's 7 Circles of Hell. Is that sort of level. Right. So each track is representing one of them. Cocytus, which also sounds like what Arnold Schwarzenegger calls cocaine in Red Dawn. Raw Deal, sorry. No, Red Dawn. I was right the first time. I'll find out what Cocytus is.
Okay.
No, Cocytus is no, it's no. Cocytus is the river of lamentation.
Oh,
This is where you reflect on things.
right.
Or you laminate your badge. One of the two.
Okay. Well, this track is where they show off a very clever kind of electronic meets industrial side. That I think they actually do particularly well. I was getting little hints of Author and Punisher towards the kind of end of the track where the industrial drums come in, and you get the kind of distorted vocals over the top. They do kind of touch on that again on the closing track, Erebos, which feels more like a kind of outro of kind of like.
Well, it is. I think that's the if you were watching, kind of reminded me of if you watch the movie The House That Jack Built, and you go through all the trials and tribulations of that, you end up in a place that feels like a kind of like a closing montage, and that's what Erebos kind of feels like. It's kind of it's the final bow before the curtain comes down, so to speak.
It feels it's a lot of kind of weird noises and distorted sounds, rather than like a structured kind of track with verses and stuff. My only kind of disappointment with that was once I heard that, I was kind of like,
more.
Why don't you use more of that? Because
really fucking good at it. Really good at it.
Really good at it. And I was just like, when I heard that, I was starting to imagine what it would sound like if they did start to incorporate that more with the kind of post-metal tracks. I was thinking like stylistic possibilities are like more endless there. You could explore more areas. And I think it would probably even make them stand out even more from the pack. That being said, I did enjoy the path that the album took. I think it's got a really good flow to it. There's some nice breaks in the intensity to give you that kind of like moment of reflection. And it's got plenty going on. There's enough variation in the rhythm to keep you engaged. I really like the rhythms they used. The only thing that kind of I wasn't so fussed on was I felt like there was some vocal effects that I felt were kind of used throughout the album that at first wasn't totally sure about it. There's a bit of distortion used. Also that kind of radio, kind of lo-fi effect is used at times as well. And I thought maybe it was used a little bit too much. I kind of found it a little bit off-putting, to be honest, when I was listening to it. But
I have a theory on it. A theory, but I don't think you're wrong in the context of how we listen to albums. I think you're probably right in what you say.
Yeah, I think it made more sense when the electronic industrial parts came in, and those parts are leaning right into those kind of distorted vocals. I thought, like, okay, that's making more sense why they've used them in other parts of the album. I still felt it was slightly overused a little bit, but I did understand the kind of the thought behind it. I think, like, as post-metal albums go, I think this is a very solid release. I was trying to think, like, it's not anything that I haven't really heard done before, but I think with the electronic parts added in, it does give you another kind of element to kind of enjoy or explore. And that did elevate it a bit for me above a kind of standard post-metal album. I just like to hear them explore more with that, to be honest. I think that would kind of push them into the next level. But as for a band that I never heard before, still enjoyable, still enjoyed it. A lot of good qualities about this album, and the production is very fitting of the sound as well. I did like it as well. What about yourself? What do you think?
I'm gonna link into what my theory was specifically about the vocal effect. And it was something you mentioned, it actually tied in after you mentioned specific things from the press statement. Once again, putting out there, don't read the press statement, I just listen to the album. I like to go in raw, Dave. No protection used here. And to me, I think that's an element of, there's a visual aspect to their live shows where those things link in. There's a specific reason why the effect comes in. Like, I imagine if the band were playing things and then staticky stuff started happening on the screen, vocally that would mirror what's going on, and it would probably work itself through. Very much like yourself, I think the band have a untapped resource here that instantly makes them different than about 99% of the bands in the genre that are playing in. And that's the industrial element they bring in here, which sounds fucking killer. Now, do I want a whole album of industrial post-metal? Yes, I do. It's exactly what I fucking want. And you mentioned Author and Punisher, and that was in the back of my head. But there was also some of the more abrasive Nine Inch Nails Sims in there. Also bits of Ministry as well, a little bit of Skinny Puppy. Whilst being like harsher produced, but those were in the back of my head as well, and it started to make me smile a little bit, specifically in Cocytus and Erebos, where I think the band move out with the comfort zone that the rest of the album is in, and I don't mean that they're kind of phoning things in. It just, they're very proficient in everything they do elsewhere. That felt like the risk, and to me that risk isn't a risk if you then use it on the closing track as well. It's something that you clearly, while you were writing the album, went, this is cool as fuck, we need to do this again. I, like yourself, would love to see that incorporated more throughout the album. When you have a couple of tracks that are easily over the 11-minute mark, a little industrial section here or there, it's not going to go amiss. Musically, I find them really, really interesting. Post-metal has become a very... If you imagine it being like a hot tub, it's a very full hot tub at the moment. Like, if I wanted to get in just now, my dick is rubbing on someone's back when I get in. That's how full the hot tub is, you know what I mean? There's just not a lot of room at the moment, and the bands, I personally feel, that are at the top of that aren't just one or two now. There's a good collection of fucking A-tier, like, post-metal bands that are putting their own spin on a core sound, granted. Things haven't really moved that far from the core sound, but they're doing their own little inflections and quirks. And Metide are not far off that, I don't think. I think when it's at its best, it reminds me of Cult of Luna and The Ocean. Like, it has those moments where I feel like it's almost transposable to what those bands were doing a decade ago and comfortably fitting in. And they're early in their career, so from their point of view, I think the longer the band goes, the more they're going to incorporate and diversify. All those bands have as well. They get to a certain point where they're like, what do we explore into next? What theme allows us to gravitate towards something else? I think as a concept, I don't think I've heard any other album deal with like the Five River or Hades. And I got a wee bit geeky, I'm not going to lie, a wee geek boner popped up when I saw them listed together. Bands will use, like, there's a band called Styx. I don't know if they know they're named after the river Styx, maybe they are. I know there's a band called Acheron, right? Like, I don't know if they know specifically about that, but I felt myself, there's not one called Cocytus, probably because Dave called it an STD. But, you know what I mean, the connotations that come with that speak with themselves, or cockatations that come with that. But I like that as a theme, and I feel like each track actually tailored to the specific denomination of what the river represents is handled really, really, really well. So this is not a case of a band writing a bunch of songs and be like that, right, let's just find something on the internet we can slap names to. It genuinely feels like there's been a thoughtful process to associate the music with the feel and vibe of the actual name. And that, to me, once again, just shows just that little bit extra effort, going the extra mile, which to me rewards the listener. I think there are some bits where I think they get a little bit lost in the kind of post-metal crowd. I think vocally, it's difficult to, if you put him in a Usual Suspects lineup of fucking hand me the keys, motherfucker, you know what I mean, like lineup of people, and they all did this vocal thing, like we had like fucking Cult of Luna and The Ocean and all the rest, and got them to do their aggro vocals. I think there's a laziness in this genre just now with tone. It's not always there in everything he does. He uses some vocal effects to stretch it. He actually does have a range which extends beyond it as well, which is used very few and far between, which I think he should maybe lean more into, because it adds a differentiating factor to what they do. It's a long album. I mean, this is like another 50 minutes. I'm saying another because every album we reviewed thus far tonight has been 50 minutes. And the one we'll start to review is 45. So it's another 50 minutes. And it does, for the most part, I feel, reward the listener and merit its full length. I do feel on Flegion or I'm gonna go track number 5. That's the one to me that feels like it spends and it's got a heavy Tool vibe as well. There's like some guitar solos and some lead work that drag things off, where there's maybe about a 2-minute section where I don't necessarily think it overall does the same level of building to the track that the rest of the album does. So I kind of feel like there's a level of a bit more of editing scrutiny where they could come in here and do a little bit of chopping. That being said, it's a great post-metal album. Its biggest detraction is that had this come out like 2 years ago, I think I genuinely would have been higher on it.
Yeah.
But the genre itself has went through this renaissance now that I think the elements that I gravitated to the most here were where they were experimenting in industrial sims and tones and textures, which I've just not heard a lot of bands do. Like, I'm not saying bands haven't done that. Like, industrial music and post-metal music evoke the same color pattern. You know, it's the same palette. But when I think of like an album like Vertical from Cult of Luna, which is a concept album based around industrial themes, they use the synths more as warmth and the music as the mechanical element.
Yeah.
The electronics here are used, like Author and Punisher use them to literally add oomph behind what the rest of the music's doing. And that, to me, is what makes them really exciting. It's very much like yourself, more of that element. And I feel like there are certain tracks where they could stretch themselves more. I don't think we're even scratching the surface of the musicality in this band. I think they're still finding their foothold as a concept album. I think it's really, really, really well done.
Yeah.
As a great post-metal album, I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's not far from the mark.
Yep. Okay, so what are we going to score Erebos by Metide? I agree. I think like coming off of a year in 2022, which had some
unbelievable... It wasn't even a full year. It was like 5 months.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
It was like it was July to December, and my brain was melted at the end of it.
Yeah. I think this is a really enjoyable album. Maybe doesn't quite match last year's kind of high standard, but as a band only on album 2, I think it definitely shows a ton of potential. I think, definitely I would lean more into the electronic side of things, bring that more into the post-metal sound. And I really like the stuff they were doing rhythmically as well, that kind of like Tool-esque kind of the types of rhythms they were using. I think they could even push that a bit further as well. But yeah, still a very enjoyable album, and hopefully it leads them on to bigger things. I'm going to go 3.5 on this one. What about yourself? What are you thinking?
We are syncing up. Our menses have sunk up, Dave. I am under 3.5, but I've said this line already, but I want to reiterate it. I used it in a different review. I think this band has all the elements and all the tools at their disposal to release something relatively soon after this, which is going to be a monumental jump up. And I think a lot of that lies in the stuff that they tease on this album are using a track that they don't fully embrace, and I think they need to embrace that side, because that's what will make them stand out of the pack.
Yeah. So, Metide and Erebos out on July 7th on Black Lion Records. Links below to the band, their Bandcamp pre-order. Check them out, have a little listen, let us know what you think in the comments below. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.